Welcome to Camaraderie, the channel your mother warned you about. This video is sponsored by William Shakespeare. What's good, Bill? So if you've spent any sort of time looking at content on a tech channel or a photography channel or a creative, whatever kind of channel, it's pretty hard to get away from gear talk. Not that kind. No, not that kind either. Close, but still no. The kind of gear that you use for making stuff. Cameras, lenses, stabilizers, computers, video cards, etc., etc., etc.
Etc., etc., etc.
Your R5s, your A7Ss, and Summicrons, and M1 MacBooks, and DJIs, and, well, you get the point. There's new stuff out every year, seemingly a new version every year, and most of the time it's just a slight variation on what came the year before. There's been like an entire industry that's kind of grown up around this whole idea of reviewing tech stuff. I mean, there's thousands of channels out there. Whether or not the yearly release cycle is a result of planned obsolescence or just a way for companies to repackage the same product with a slight upgrade and call it a game changer so that they can convince the consuming public to buy their stuff year after year and fill their coffers. Honestly, that's probably a topic for another time, but the point is, new gear is exciting, and I get why so many people talk about it all the time. It's cool to see an already solid product get a new feature or two that opens up possibilities for those of us with a creative tilt. And occasionally you do actually get something that could be considered game-changing. But gear acquisition syndrome is a nasty thing to catch, and it can happen to the best of us. With the yearly slew of shiny new things paraded in front of our little crow brains, it's easy to feel like, I need that. Oh, my camera only does 4K 30 and it's holding me back. I need to have 4K 60 in order to achieve my dream of getting 1 trillion subscribers. This whole thing became so widespread that it caused a lot of people, especially in my particular niche of photography, to kind of swing back the other way. Makes sense, you know, every action has an equal and opposite reaction and all that. The common storyline seems to be they got gas and then found out that it wasn't helping them at all. They found that it wasn't really helping them grow their craft, and so they stopped clamoring for the latest and greatest, and some even went further and just like got rid of everything and just like stripped down to like a very minimal setup. And it works. Speaking from experience, when you limit your gear, you're forced to work with what you have, and that can have incredible benefits. It can also lead to, let's call it creative problem solving. I'm sure there's a better way to put that, but if you're only taking out a 50mm lens when you're going out to just walk around and shoot or whatever, and you want something to be more prominent in your frame, then you're not switching lenses. You're not wasting time switching to a telephoto lens just for the one shot. You just walk closer to the thing that you want to be bigger in your frame. You become more intimately familiar with what your gear is capable of, and then you can also like push yourself and your gear, and what you can accomplish with it might actually end up surprising you. So that's the basic setup for why gear doesn't matter is such a popular mindset in certain corners, and I find myself in that corner quite often. Now, a quick bit of background about myself and why I'm talking about this. I started this channel several years back now, just because I had too many cameras and I wanted to do something with them. I wasn't even a photographer at the time. I just liked the way they looked, and I was a hipster millennial dirtbag and liked the idea of shooting with film. I still am a hipster millennial dirtbag, but I was back then too. After a while, I found that I quite like photography and shooting with film, and I felt like I couldn't get enough cameras and I had to have them all. I wanted all of the cameras I could get my grubby little mitts on. I had close to 90 different cameras at one point, but I didn't feel like I was growing as an artist. In retrospect, it's because I was stretching myself way too thin. I wasn't specializing. I was just always looking for the next camera that I could get my hands on, just so maybe that one would unlock some part of my brain and then I could be a photographer. I would find another camera and then I would blast a roll or two of film through it and then just repeat the process. I believe it was one of Ted Forbes's videos back in the day, from The Art of Photography. It enlightened me to the advantages of just sticking with one camera setup for a while. He didn't explicitly state it, but like that notion is what's at the core of the whole idea of gear doesn't matter. The photographer is what matters. And I think that's true, except that it isn't. And gear matters quite a lot, actually. At least to an extent. I'm not saying that you should always be on the lookout for the latest and greatest, or that you should try and cram as much gear into a camera bag as you can for a trip. Lord knows I took way too much with me when I went out west. I'm just saying I think there's room for a bit more nuance. Gear matters in the broad sense because if you don't, you can't do anything without any gear. You can't take pictures if you don't have a camera. I think a more accurate statement would be the right gear matters. Right for you, right for the job, right for your aims and goals and what you hope to accomplish with a certain project. Going back to the 50mm lens example I was talking about earlier, if you want that compressed look that a telephoto lens gets you, if that's what you're after, there's no amount of walking up closer to your subject that's going to give you that. If you didn't pack that lens, there's no way you're getting that shot. In that same vein, when I went to Chicago recently, I knew that I would be wanting to get a lot of shots of just the crazy architecture that they have there and just try and capture as much of the muchness of that city. At that point, I only had a 50mm lens for my Nikon F2, so I bought a 28mm lens. And if you'll allow me to toot my own horn... What does my own horn sound like? I think they actually turned out pretty okay. And while I was there, I thought, oh man, I really wish I had a telephoto lens for my F2. Honestly though, for the limited time that I had in Chicago proper, 2 lenses was borderline too many. Oh, wow, what a good joke! I made a conscious decision whenever me and Clint would leave the hotel to go walk around the city for a while to only take one of my 2 lenses with me. That way I wouldn't be wasting potentially precious seconds swapping out lenses, and then plus I wouldn't have to spend a ton of time thinking about like, would this look better with a 50 or a 28? And I could just dig in and shoot. But Luke, you're saying 2 different things. Gear doesn't matter, but it also does. Nuance, dear viewer. Nuance. Like I said before, the right gear matters. Another example of this would be my recent foray into completely switching up my scanning workflow. Since I started developing and scanning my own film back in like 2015, up until a couple months ago, this past August, I was using a Canoscan 9000F Mark II for all my film scanning, whether it was black and white or color. Or even that one roll of 120 that I did last year. It got the job done good enough, and that it was good for that was I was okay with that until I wasn't. My color scans never turned out how they would from like a lab scan, and I eventually decided to take the plunge into DSLR scanning so that I could work with Negative Lab Pro, and it went fine. Quickly realized that my equipment wasn't up to par, and I needed better gear in order to get the results that I was looking for. After another month of tinkering with my setup on a very limited budget, I got to a point where I was pleased with the results, but I still felt decidedly about them. Like I felt like there was something else missing. I know what it was, but like I said, limited budget. Like budgetary stuff aside, I couldn't understand why some of my pictures just weren't working. More than a few of them looked soft, even though I had the focus nailed down in camera, and my aperture was at like, it was usually either f16 or f22 for the ones that I'm thinking of, but they still just looked soft. Like, what's going on? Am I just that bad at taking pictures? It wasn't until I got the Plus-Tech scanner that I talked about in my last video that I realized, you know, gear kind of does matter. At least the right gear does. I wasn't a bad photographer. I'm just drawn that way. What? I wasn't a bad photographer. I just didn't have great processing equipment. And not getting good, consistent results from color film is one of the reasons why my black and white output is just way higher than my color output. Well, that and the cost difference. But anyways, point being, I got the right gear for me, and that allows me to further explore my creativity and express myself in a way that's fulfilling for me. I think that's really what I was getting at with the title of this video. Of course, gear doesn't matter in the sense that you always have to keep up with the latest trends, and just having good gear doesn't make you a good photographer or videographer or painter, you know, whatever. But gear does matter, because not having the right gear can seriously hinder your growth as an artist and keep you from fulfilling your creative vision. You gotta have a dolly and a zoom to get that dolly zoom shot. You gotta have a camera that goes well beyond 60 frames a second in order to get decent slow-mo. When it comes to gear, it's about identifying what you hope to achieve with your project, whether that's you just grabbing a camera and some film and going out to shoot downtown somewhere for a little bit, or if you're working as a cinematographer on a film set and getting the gear that will help you tell the story. Just don't go overboard with it. That's all I've got for y'all today. Let me know in the comments how bad your gas is. Thanks for watching. I will be on this side of the lens in the next video, so until then, see ya! Outro music. Outro. Click the cards and the subscribe and the cards. See you in some of my other videos.